Hi, I'm Tim Major, and I'm very happy to be here with the Super Relaxed Fantasy Club. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to read a bit from my new book in this video, and I'm going to tell you about some of the books that I've been reading during lockdown. I hope you're all safe and well, and I've just finished homeschooling this morning of my two young kids, and I've been out for a run, which is why I'm looking a bit pink probably, so apologies for that. But I think I'm ready to get going. I have my cup of tea now, and I'm all set. So yes, I'm Tim Major. I'm a science fiction and sort of weird horror writer. My last two books include Snakeskins, and my new book is Hope Island, which is out now in the US and out on June the 8th in the UK. So I'm going to read from Hope Island, which is about a British mother and her daughter, teenage daughter, who go to an American island in the hope of reconnecting. And there they meet creepy children. And this scene involves the teenage daughter being asked to join the group of children in their sort of holiday club on the island. It was only as Nina entered the kitchen that she saw that it was occupied. 7 children of different ages sat around a large square pine table. Before each of them was a plate with a thick slice of bread, and beside each plate a tall glass of milk. Nina scanned their faces, trying to determine which of the girls was the one she'd encountered on the harbour road. The tallest of them, perhaps? She couldn't be sure. None of the children said a word, but they swiveled in their chairs to regard Nina. Their expressions were blank. And then, almost in unison, they all smiled. Out of the corner of her eye, Nina registered that Laurie had followed her in. Marie bent to a Moses basket in the corner of the room. The baby lay within it, his eyes open and watching the other children. When Marie tried to lift him, he squealed, and his hand punched upwards. She straightened again, leaving him be. "Kids," she said, "this is Laurie Fisher and her mum. Laurie would like to join in with the vacation fun, if that's all right with you guys." None of the children spoke, but they were all still smiling. Nina recognised Thomas, who was a head taller than any of the others. Both of his hands were laid flat on the surface of the table. Laurie raised a hand. "Hi, I remember some of you." Marie waited a moment before adding, "That's good. Thomas, I know you know Laurie pretty well already, so I'm counting on you to make her feel welcome, understand?" Almost imperceptibly, Thomas nodded. "Okay," Marie continued, unruffled by the muted response. "Clockwise from the top. There's Thomas, of course, and then Ali, then Eugenie, I should say Jeannie as she likes to be known these days, and then Sally and Landon, their brother and sister, and then Chase, and then David. Thomas is the oldest, no kidding, right? He's a regular Stretch Armstrong. He's 15. And Landon's the youngest at 7, but he's no pushover. Actually, we'd normally have one even younger. Noah Hutchinson's only 6. He and his sister, May, have been absent for a few days. Some sort of bug." Laurie said, "Hi." "So you guys going to welcome Laurie?" Marie said. Nina flinched at the abrupt scraping of chairs being pushed back. The children rose and padded over to stand before Laurie. Their motions appeared more dutiful than enthusiastic, with no particular curiosity. They were all still smiling, though, which was something. They rearranged themselves to make a tight circle around their new playmate. Nina marvelled at Laurie's composure under such scrutiny. When Nina had been at school, being watched like this would have turned her into a shy, stuttering fool. Laurie had Rob's confidence. But then Laurie glanced back at her, and Nina saw uncertainty in her expression. Nina gave a smile of sympathy. Laurie's expression hardened, but as she turned back to the children, her body language changed, her limbs looser, her smile broader. "Did I see a Nintendo out there?" Laurie said, addressing Thomas. "And a dance mat?" "Yes," Thomas replied dully. Maybe that was it, Nina thought. Video games had made him unresponsive. "Fancy a tournament? I'm no good past intermediate level, but it's always a good laugh." The other children looked at Thomas. Something happened to Thomas's smile. Its tight formality melted, so it became wide and genuine. "Later, maybe," he said. He reached out and clapped a hand onto Laurie's shoulder. Nina shuddered, remembering the momentary illusion of him on the verge of pushing Laurie from the cliff. In a far more animated tone, he said, "We like playing outside. We have this game where we gather sticks and then patrol the island. It's fun." Sally, who looked up the next oldest after Thomas, reached out to take Laurie's hand. "You're tall, so you'll be good as a lookout." Laurie's eyes flicked to Nina. Now Nina felt certain this display of confidence was for her benefit. Sure. Within moments, the group bustled into the main schoolroom, shuffling about as they pulled on their shoes. They didn't speak. Nina felt off balance, with Laurie no longer at her side. It all sounds a touch military, she said to Marie. You going to lecture me about American kids being all guns and fighting, the British children are innocent as lambs? It had crossed Nina's mind, the first part at least. Not at all. Don't worry, it's all really sweet. It's more Davy Crockett than all that. You mean they hunt? And wasn't he a soldier? All right, not Davy Crockett then. How about Robin Hood and his merry men? To go with an English theme. She eased herself into a chair and glanced at the baby, who was beginning to grumble restlessly. Through the doorway, Nina saw that the children were ready to leave. Thomas, Marie called out. Her son sloped back into the kitchen. If you're back by midday, I'll have a spread all laid out. Thomas nodded stiffly. A sharper sound came from the Moses basket, the beginnings of outrage. Marie dived to it, scooping up the baby. As she did, she said, Thomas, be a love and fetch a mug for Nina, would you? And bring the coffee pot. You don't need to, Nina began, but Thomas had already clomped to a cupboard and retrieved a red mug and then crossed to the stove. The coffee pot was angled with its handle to the wall. Nina winced as the boy curled his hand around the steel pot rather than using the handle. But she was relieved to see that he carried it to the table and his expression was neutral. It mustn't have been hot. Thank you, she said, as she placed the items on the table. She reached out to the pot and then withdrew her hand quickly, staring at her scalded fingertips. Apologies for not doing any of the American accents. It's not really my skill set. Hope Island is about creepy children. It's also about archaeological finds and a strange community and my recent obsession about sound recordings, field recordings. It's out soon in the UK. Lockdown. We're about 7 weeks or 8 weeks in at this point, and it's been strange. There's 2 young kids in our house. Oddly enough, I found myself reading more than usual, which isn't at all what I expected. So my recent reading pile, it looks a bit unlike my usual sort of thing. But I began, as soon as lockdown was announced, I started reading Middlemarch, thinking, at that point, it was unclear how close the tidal wave of the virus was going to be. And so I don't know, some part of me thought I'd better read Middlemarch, just in case. And I did. And that was wonderful. And I read it far quicker than I would have imagined. But it was perfect tone in the midst of panic, just very long, very calm, and for the most part, very trivial compared to the next choice that I made was Candide, which is a fantasy book and a very funny one. And then Mrs. Dalloway, which has flights of fantasy, certainly, and got me finally writing again after 3 weeks, although everything I wrote sounded like Mrs. Dalloway. Lanark is another classic and another very thick book. It has some of the wildest flights of fantasy that I can think of in any book I've read, as well as long passages of realism. And then finally, the most recent book I've read is Therese Raquin, which I had no preconceptions about. I thought it was about a mild-mannered haberdasher, but it turns out it's brutal. It's more like Patricia Highsmith or Edgar Allan Poe. Absolutely incredible horror novel, essentially. And that is very slim. It's only 190 pages, and it is absolutely wonderful. I read it in a couple of days. And other than that, with my young kids, my eldest of my children, 6-year-old, I've been reading the Phoenix a lot. And here you can see the Phoenix is indoctrinating children with horror stories, with Call of Cthulhu from a very young age. And so, my 6-year-old is completely on board with horror now. So those are my recent reads. And I think I better sign off now. So thank you for having me here. I hope you're all okay and safe in the lockdown and reading plenty. Thank you. Bye-bye.